We've been hearing on the news two new reports into the death of Cape Breton teenager Clayton Miller conclude he died accidentally. Miller died 25 years ago at the age of 17. Since his death, his family has raised questions about how he died and the investigations that followed. Now the province's chief medical examiner says Miller died from a combination of hypothermia and alcohol consumption. On the same day, the Serious Incident Response Team cleared police of any involvement in the teenager's death. Miller went missing in May 1990 after police raided a party in the woods. His body was found in a stream 2 days later. In the fall of last year, a retired nurse released a report suggesting Miller had been beaten before he died and his body moved. But the chief medical examiner says there's no evidence to support that claim. And joining me now is the chief medical examiner for the province, Dr. Matt Bowes. Good morning. And CERT director, Senior Incident Response Team, Ron McDonald. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Bowes. You combed through a massive amount of evidence in this case, but over the last 25 years, there has been so much confusion and misinformation about what happened. What makes you now so certain in your findings that this was an accident?
Well, I think that if you comb through all of the material and try to separate the speculation and rumor from what is actually objectively verifiable, and you concentrate your efforts on looking at those source documents, I think it becomes clear that this young man did not die of a violent death.
Okay, and the two of you worked in concert, I believe, or you worked together, you collaborated on this report. How did your investigation tie into Dr. Bowe's, and what information led you to determine that police weren't involved in this?
Well, first of all, Dr. Bowes and I work together whenever there's a death, and we've had several cases together such as that. So Dr. Bowes looks at the medical evidence and the forensic medical evidence in particular, and what we look at where our expertise is to examine witness statements, examine other evidence, and put it all together. What really struck me is to have a murder, you need essentially two things. You need someone who was killed, and you need someone who did it. So the someone who was killed we left to Dr. Bowes, and the someone who did it we left to CERT. And what struck me from this file and all of its review is there is simply no evidence to suggest that the police had anything to do with Clayton Miller at any time that weekend. There have been a few stories that have been clearly refuted and do not offer any evidence.
And in your report, you talk about the rumor mill that built up around this report. Something that really brought this story back to the forefront was Kathleen Dwyer's report from the fall, which you actually say is essentially false. You say her findings don't match with the evidence. You suggest that a picture she used was either doctored or so enlarged that she could no longer tell what it was. She determined that a gash on his head, and you said it was actually his ear. Can you describe for me what impact that report has had, how troubling that is?
Well, and my mandate was certainly to look at that report and see if it was credible, and it is not. I was able to have access, of course, to the best quality pictures and all of the original statements. I think it's pretty clear that Ms. Dwyer was looking or working from a copy of a photograph. And the thing on the left side of Clayton Miller's head is pretty clearly the left ear, actually, when you look at the good photograph. Certainly the report has stoked a lot of emotion in that community, but I think that we have to focus ourselves on what is objective and what is verifiable. And the evidence speaks very strongly to a young man who unfortunately got too drunk and too cold.
But how did we get here? Because at the end of your report, you do say that mistakes made at the beginning in the investigation allowed for a rumor mill to start, allowed for questions to be raised about what happened. Why was there confusion at the beginning, at least, as to why he did? Some people said that he died from drowning, and you say that was because doctors just wrongly assumed that because he was found near a stream or in a stream, he must have drowned. And so that confusion about how he died, you know, obviously and of course understandably created questions for a family that is grieving the death of a son who dies far too soon and with so few answers. So how did that actually happen? How did we get to that point where there was such confusing information at the start?
Well, and you must understand that the current medical examiner service is a centralized and professionalized system. But back when this all occurred, there were a lot of rural medical examiners with I guess, a variable skill set with respect to investigating death. And I think that the doctors at the time assumed that this boy must have drowned because he was found in the water. That is not true. You don't need to drown if you're found in water. I think it's clear from the witness statements that his mouth and nose probably weren't in water. And if the mouth and nose are not in water, you don't drown.
Okay.
And that confusion, I think, is fair to say, is probably the start of all of the rumors.
Okay, and I just want to go back to you, Mr. McDonald. One of the allegations is that a currently serving Cape Breton police officer was withholding information in this case. How did you get to the point where you were able to determine that that was not the case, and that, even broader speaking, there was no police involvement in this?
Well, that allegation was what got us involved in the first place. We started by thoroughly reviewing the file, by interviewing the officer. We were impressed with his credibility, but we didn't stop there. We needed to determine if there would be any evidence to challenge what he had to say. And that's what got us to look at the entire file to determine whether there was any evidence of any police wrongdoing. And to a great extent, what that meant was looking not only at the evidence, but also looking at the rumors and speculation that had been out there and refuting all of those rumors and speculation that were central to the case, which is what my report really concentrates on. And it refutes some of the more important rumors and speculation that have been out there, in particular the one that suggested that Clayton's body was not in the stream on the Saturday. And I talk about that quite a bit in the two main characters in that, how their statements, they gave diametrically opposed statements, first to the police and then later on, after perhaps speaking with other people, they gave other statements, and there's just no reliability in those statements. So we are left with no evidence of anyone from the police force having anything to do with Clayton, and we're left with Dr. Bose's evidence that he didn't die from force. Okay,
and very briefly, because I am out of time, your report says that you don't have to prove beyond a reasonable level of doubt. You just it's a bit of a lower burden of proof that you have to give in this report. Does that give this family, who is clearly upset with the findings, something to hook onto, that there are still questions that aren't answered?
I think that we have to be practical about this. Every death investigation that we do may leave minor questions unanswered. That is routine. But we hope to answer the major questions of any death investigation. With respect to Clayton Miller, we have answered the major questions. I hope that the report will bring this family peace.
Okay, I have to thank both of you for coming in. We are out of time, unfortunately. Ron McDonald, thank you for coming in. Dr. Matt Bose, thank you.